Hey folks, Nathan P. Butler here. If you watch this channel much and saw any of my stuff about board games, you'll find that one of the things I'm really into is deck building games, like Hand of Fate Ordeals, or Hero Realms, Star Realms, stuff like that. And this is a deck building game that I've recently acquired thanks to backing a Kickstarter, but I did it in kind of an odd way. There was one pledge level that would allow you to not only become a character in the game, which is coming later with the regular release, and to get one of their prototype playtesting copies of the game almost immediately after the Kickstarter campaign ended. So that's how I have this copy of The Last Command from Ty McDonald, and I've really been enjoying this as sort of an unusual deck building game, and I realized in playing this quite a bit and talking with the creator that they still have late pledges going on. There's actually a late pledge feature now built into Kickstarter. So my hope is that by showing this, I can share some of my excitement, but also at the same time, maybe get some other folks out there who are into deck building games to learn about this game and perhaps go over there and late pledge also. So no affiliation actually with the creator or anything, but I was fortunate enough to grab that Bounty Hunter pledge level so I could play it early, and I'm very much glad that I did. So let's take a look at how The Last Command actually plays. This is not a content overview video. Instead, I want to show you a little bit about how essentially a player turn plays. And this, even though it says it is for 2 players on the prototype box here, actually does have a solo mode. And I want to show you a little bit about how the solo bot works, because I know a lot of folks these days do, like me, play games that are solo rather than just multiplayer. So that's the box, at least the prototype version of the box. It is actually signed by the creator as part of that pledge level here. All the stuff you're going to see here, it's all prototype components, a bunch of placeholder art, unfinished art. There may even be some rules that get tweaked along the way. But at least for now, I want to show you sort of where the game stands and a little bit about how it works to see if you might perhaps, like me, be interested in this one. It's a dual, D-U-A-L, deck building game that features a dual, D-U-E-L, between capital ships. So the story behind it is that 50 years ago, a vicious unknown group invaded the settled systems. The fighting was bloody and desperate. Countless ships and dozens of planets were lost. Most of the surviving species met together and decided that unity would be needed to prevail. The Federation was formed. The Sunder, that is, Sunder in quotes, as the enemy came to be known, were eventually beaten back, excised from known space. Now they have returned, and war has resumed. The end is near. One final battle to dictate the fate of the galaxy. Take this ship, Captain, for it truly is the last command. So you're playing as either the Sunder or the Federation as essentially their sort of flagship, their capital ship in this final major confrontation. So a lot of folks who saw this initially, I saw some chatter online, initially thought, oh, well, this is kind of like Star Realms, right? Not really. I mean, I guess you could say, looking at the art here of the cover, which is also the art of the mats. This is one of the 2 mats here showing the other ship, the one that's in the background of that image there. And thought, okay, well, yeah, they got that ship art. That ship art looks vaguely reminiscent of Star Realms, and it's a deck building game. So, yeah, surely there was a little bit of inspiration from Star Realms, but that's really the only place you're going to see a ship here. Star Realms is about playing cards that are pretty much all ships, except for a handful of sort of plug-in expansions you could do with things like heroes and whatnot. And you're trying to take down the authority, the sort of general empire level of your opponent. It's not direct ship-to-ship combat. For that, you need something more like Solar Titans. But Solar Titans, even as a capital ship battler, is very different in that it relies on the position of pieces of your ship, the angles at which certain weapons can attack and whatnot. Also a great deck building game, but very different from what we're going to see here with The Last Command. The Last Command is all about controlling 2 different decks that you will use through your deck building to control your sections of engineering, comms, and tactical, using systems and crew as you try to take down the other ship. Now, one thing I think is pretty cool just from a bling standpoint is that the game actually comes in its standard edition with these neoprene mats for the 2 players. So you have a faction symbol, the name of the ship, the name of the faction. There's a credit track. That's where you're going to keep track of the money that you can spend to actually purchase things. And unlike in many deck building games, this is persistent. It carries over from turn to turn. You have a health track here, starting at 20, and if it hits 0, obviously you're destroyed. The other person has won the game. You have a quote underneath to go along with the sign. In this case, the Imperator, ship of the Emperor, sword of death, herald of our glorious return. Then we have 3 different section areas: engineering, comms, and tactical, with a place to put your system cards in here, and then a track for the energy provided to each individual system. You'll need to spend the energy to play systems. Then you have a space for crew, up to 3 crew cards underneath each one, which may or may not be from the same section, as we will see, and they tend to give other benefits, like perhaps giving energy to the section and so on. Then a space for your 2 decks, your system card deck and your crew card deck, and 2 discard piles. So a nicely organized little neoprene mat for both sides. It just comes with a standard version of the game. You hear that, Star Trek Star Realms? You can do neoprene, not crappy cardboard. Obviously, by the way, that does mean that this box is not final, because you couldn't fit this in the box. This is the other side, the one that has the art basically from the box there. And I should note that that art we just saw on that other playmat, that is used for a slipcover over the Kickstarter edition of the game. So you'll see that as outer packaging, perhaps, if you have a Kickstarter version. Then we have here the Heart of Valdaspar, Federation Remnant, with the quote, "You, Captain, are the last hope of our people, a final ship with which to draw our line in the sand." But otherwise laid out the same. I do like the fact that if you look at the art, it's sort of the same design, but in each case the sides are flipped, right? So you have the Heart of Valdaspar here on the Imperator's mat, with the Imperator here, but now it's up here, and then you have a little ship out to the side that's going to be slightly different each time. It's really just kind of a cool way of setting that up, I think. But again, just my opinion. Now you're going to need some tracking cubes, and I just put mine in a little container here that I got at like Dollar Tree or something like that. One key difference between the Kickstarter version and the regular version is that in the Kickstarter version, you're going to have yourself some metal cubes, whereas you have the acrylic cubes in the standard edition. Not sure if those are exactly which ones they will wind up being, but just to give you an idea. So the first player is going to put a tracker, whether it's metal or acrylic, whatever, onto 5 credits, 20 health, and as a human player, you're putting each of your starting power levels or energy levels at 1. If this mat was being used for the solo AI enemy, you would start at 6 and have 3 power starting in each one. So you have various different cards. You're going to have some reference cards. That's the card back here. But you have a reference card that you can use that has a turn reference, has the different icons and whatnot to make sure it's clear what each thing does, but they're also spelled out, of course, in the rulebook. And then there's 2 main types of cards for 2 different decks. Now, when you're playing solo, the enemy AI uses 1 deck that combines them, but you as the player have 2 separate decks, which of course go here and here, as I mentioned there. So you have your systems, and basically, as they're not a starting system, they're going to have a credit cost up here for when you purchase it during the game, because it is a deck building game. To play it, you have to spend power. I think I said energy before. I use the terms interchangeably, but I believe it's power officially in the game. But you'll spend your 4 and reduce your track down from, something 4 or more down, and then place it into that area. They have a little symbol to indicate what section they go in. They're also color coded. So in this case, that symbol there matches this symbol. It's also green for engineering, has a title, has some flavor text and whatnot. And you have some type of ability here. This is the ability when you play it for the first time. So when you first lay it down, that happens. This comes into play during a separate phase later in the turn. So on your turn reference, it says you're going to play all possible cards. Okay, so you're going to play all your cards. You can play cards as crew. You can play them as systems if you're paying the power cost and whatnot. And any that you don't play, you still have to do something with. So what you'll do with those is you will take those and simply discard them to your discard pile, as you would in any deck building game, typically at the end of your turn and whatnot. But you're going to get 2 credits for any card you discard without playing. So if you've got a card that you just don't want to play or can't play, it's okay. You can still discard it and get 2 credits out of it by default. So you'll play the cards, then you're going to make your market purchases, which we'll see here in just a second, using that cost up in the corner that I noted a moment ago. You're going to collect what are called crew bonuses and then draw 3 cards. Typically, your hand for any given turn is just 3 cards unless there is an ability that gives you the ability to draw an extra card, which may be in the middle of a turn or maybe during the crew bonus phase, in which case you're just drawing it up at the end of your turn. But that crew bonus thing is important, which means it's time to look at crew. Then we'll go back to those section cards. So a crew member looks like this. They have a credit cost to purchase them if they're not in your starting deck. But notice there's no power cost up here, just a section symbol. So to play these, typically there is no cost. You just play them from your hand. You play them into a section, and whereas your systems have to be played into their section, the crew expertise just indicates something that's going to give some bonuses. You can play a crew member to any section and have up to 3 active at a time. On the other hand, with systems, let's say I have shield drone out, but now I want to play repair teams. I can. I gotta pay the 2 power cost, but playing it puts it on top of the other one, completely replacing it. Though there are some cards that actually reference becoming more powerful typically based on the number of cards stacked below it. So the longer you keep these cards in play and build new deployments essentially on top of the existing cards, in some cases you get more out of it when that other card is played to the top of the stack. So you play this to any section, limit of 3 per section, and then do what's on the bottom. Typically, it's gaining some energy. Not always, but typically. Sometimes it's an and effect, sometimes it's an or effect, sometimes it's just the one effect. But the key is it goes into a section. When you get to that crew bonuses phase, that 3rd step in a turn, you take a look at your system to see if there are any symbols that match this among your crew. Now, in this case with Shield Drone, there's not, right? This is an engineering expertise, and this is looking for a tactical expertise. So this would not trigger. On the other hand, maybe we have the Naquita reactor, nice reference to a Stargate there. Maybe we have the Naquita reactor here instead. This could trigger on a green or a red, an engineering or a tactical. So I would take this, I would pay, in this case, 0 power, place it into play. When I put it in play, I get that ability, gain 2 power to every other system. So comms and tactical would get 2 power each. So in the crew bonus phase, then I check for the symbols. Is there a green? Yes, there is. I get that benefit, which in this case is to repair a malfunction. And then in this case, it's the same if I happen to have a tactical person underneath here, so I could get that. And if I had both, such as if the Lieutenant Commander Ben was out here as well, yes, I would get both bonuses. And there are some that are kind of wild, where it'll happen for any one instead of just one specific color. So for your systems, you're going to have a fair amount here of engineering system cards. I'm going to set them here for now. You're going to have a bunch of communications or comms system cards. And you're going to have a bunch of red tactical system cards. Now, your whole point of this game is to manage your ship to knock the opponent's health down to 0, or their hull, basically. The game calls it the hull integrity, down to 0. So you're going to want to be using some tactical, because typically that is how you are going to deal damage. But in some cases, like Boarding Party here with that one icon there, Boarding Party's dealing damage from the comms section. As with any deck building game, you're going to start with a fairly basic deck. In this case, there's a couple different ways you could do it. So these are your starting cards here, for example, for the Federation Remnant. You notice no cost up here, it's just the Federation Remnant symbol. You have 1 tactical system, you have 1 comms system, you have 1 engineering system. And then you have 1 engineer crew member, 1 tactician crew member, 1 comms expert crew member. Okay? And they're all pretty basic cards. So you're going to take these, you're going to shuffle them up. You have 2 decks. At the beginning of the game, when you are drawing your initial 3 cards, and at the end of your turn, when you draw 3 cards, you can choose which deck you draw each individual card from and see what you've drawn before you draw the next one. So maybe I draw this one, and I'm like, okay, awesome, so I have a comms guy. I'm not going to play him right now. I'm just going to sit him right down here. So I got my comms expert. I want to make sure that because I got enough energy in comms, I want to be able to play a comms system next turn. So I draw. Crap, that's not comms. Do I want to try to do this to get the comms system, or do I want to maybe play this because it has a cost of 0? Yeah, maybe I'll try to play this, so maybe I'll draw my third card here. Crap, I didn't get an engineer. That's fine, it just means I won't get that bonus if I play that card, and so on. You're always able to choose which decks you're drawing from unless you are specifically told otherwise. But here's the thing. Like any deck building game, it's all about how when your deck is empty and you need to draw a card, your discard gets shuffled to become your new deck. But there's a twist. I want to move our systems out of the way and just put one into each, just as an example. So let's say you've been playing for a little bit, you've managed to get a system into each, you got these guys out here, maybe you managed to match them all up so that you're getting some bonuses kind of across the board here. Great. But now either there's nothing in my crew deck, or maybe there's, I don't know, let's put these over here as a discard. Okay, so maybe I have a discard pile for my crew deck there. Well, now at the end of my turn, or if something is going to make me do it, I want to draw a crew card. The deck is empty. I'm going to take my discard to shuffle into my new deck along with all the cards of that type in play. It clears what's already out there. That's why these limits aren't as big a deal as it sounds like. It adds another strategic layer to this because you have to kind of be careful. If you got stuff out there you really like, be careful drawing from that deck, because when you get to the point where you're drawing from that deck and there's nothing in it, whether it's by choice or otherwise, all the stuff that's out there is going to be shuffled into the deck and off the table. But remember, your systems are giving you bonuses every turn during that crew bonus phase, but those initial abilities are only when they're played. And most of the crew, their abilities are when they're played. So you kind of want to be bringing them back so that you can put it back into play and get those abilities again. But there's a strategic element to it, because now, if I just had to draw a card and I cleared out all the crew, now none of my crew bonuses are going to trigger right now. I have to get more crew out there to be in position to run the bonuses. I love the strategic element of deciding which deck to draw from, not just to figure out what you need or what might be most advantageous, but also that whole press your luck almost aspect of when you want to intentionally versus unintentionally have a reshuffle and a clearing trigger. So same thing here. If I had my system deck and it was running out, I would have to completely clear out the systems as well. But it's not that it clears the whole board. It only clears the stuff from that deck. And those decks are likely to be shuffled at different times, except maybe fairly early in the game, because remember, you can choose which deck you draw from for each individual card as you're drawing your 3 at the end of your turn, or any other card effects that let you draw stuff. I love that it's not just, oh, there's 2 decks. There's a real strategy built into the interplay between them and the choices that go with it. I would note here, by the way, that those initial starting decks of 3 cards each, 3 system and 3 crew for each side, they are symmetrical by default. So even though they have different names, even though they have different artwork, or in many cases will have different artwork, you notice the abilities are the same. The top row here being the Federation, the bottom row here being the Sunder. However, that is not required. Yes, your starting crew are always symmetrical, but there is an optional variant that you can use for asymmetrical starting decks, specifically for the system cards. So these are the asymmetrical ones. You can tell they're asymmetrical because it has the same symbol, but it has an X behind it. That's how you know these are the ones to swap in if you want that asymmetry here. So for example, you go from gain 1 power to all systems with the engineer crew bonus to gain 3 power to that system, whereas for the Sunder, it's gain 5 power to that system, and then if you have an engineering crew bonus, you get to draw an extra card at the end of your turn. When it's a crew bonus, that's when it's at the end of your turn. Any other time, it's during the turn. Trade Rocket here. 3 credits. While this card is uncovered, market purchases may be made to the top of your deck for 2 extra credits. And then the Comms Expert bonus is 3 more credits. For quick ship, for Sunder, it's scrap a market card, which means remove it from the game, scrap a market card, and gain credits equal to its credit cost. And the comms expert bonus is to deal 1 damage to the other player. You can see a little bit better there. Pardon me, the glare is something that I can't really control in here very well. Then we have, for tactical, we have basic laser and siege cannon. Basic laser hits for 1, and then if you have a tactician, it hits another. And a siege cannon hits for 1, and you may discard one of your opponent's in-play cards. And then the tactician bonus is not to deal 1 damage, but to deal a malfunction. So you can play an asymmetrical starting game if you want to. Now, I mentioned malfunctions with that symbol a second ago, and the one about repairing a malfunction earlier. That is this deck of cards, which also, thanks to having the same card back, these are also going to wind up in your decks. It starts as a deck that's out on the table face up. You know what the next malfunction is going to be that could hit you. And anytime somebody gets that add a malfunction ability, they're able to draw that top card off of the deck and stick it on top of either of their opponent's discards. Again, system or crew. It's up to the attacker. And these are pretty detrimental. They're certainly more detrimental than things like maybe weaknesses in DC deck building game, because sometimes they don't go away. So in this case, for instance, when you draw this, as you're doing your card draw, you're going to take 1 damage, but then you do get to draw a replacement card, basically, and you're going to discard this back to the same deck's discard. This is going to come back every single time your deck cycles, unless you find a way to get rid of it with like a repair action. But some of these, when they happen, you place it on top of the malfunction deck. In this case, it counts as your card draw, so you don't get a replacement card, but it does go away after happening once. In this case, take 2 damage, draw a card to replace it, and then place it on top of the malfunction deck. But notice it says top. But on top of the malfunction deck, it's going to be the next one to be dealt again. So, kind of an interesting mechanism here. Actually, I have probably won more games with this by putting malfunctions in the solo AI's deck than I have by actually dealing enough damage to hit 0 with the regular, like, tactical damage dealing abilities. These malfunctions can be brutal, especially if they can't make them go away with repair abilities. Now, I talked about the market phase where you can purchase cards. This is another instance where I really love the decision space that this game provides, because most deck building games, typically, not always, but most deck building games will have a river of cards. Maybe it's 5, maybe it's 6, all coming from one deck, randomly coming out, and you're just kind of stuck with them until an ability lets you replace them, or somebody purchases one of the cards and it winds up being replaced. So you may get great cards, you may get ones that don't fit your strategy. It really just kind of depends on sheer luck, most of the time. And a lot of those games also give you the option of some always available cards, perhaps kind of off to the side somewhere, where if there's nothing you want to buy in that center row, but maybe you want to buy something at least, you could go for one of those. Ascension does it, Star Realms does it, Hand of Fate Ordeals does it, and so on. Most games do it. But not this one. Because this one provides some really heavy decision space when it comes to purchases, because there is no river. Every single one of the 3 different sections of crew and the 3 different sections of systems all have their own purchasable cards at any given time. Your crew cards are separated by section: engineering, comms, and tactical, or I should say engineer, comms expert, and tactician, and put out like this, with the top one flipped over. So you really wouldn't have it flipped over per se, just make it a face-up stack. So during your market phase, you could purchase any of them, and doing so would just reveal the next one underneath as the next one that's available for purchase. The malfunctions, of course, there are not for purchase, but there is going to be a stack of them. They typically suggest in the diagrams and whatnot to put it next to the crew. And then somewhere else, maybe off to the side, they suggest in the images in the rulebook, kind of having it off to the right for one of the players here, you have your tactical, comms, and engineering system cards also separated out, and at any given time have 2 on offer. If one of them gets purchased, the next one flips out, and so on. So you will always have an option to purchase a crew from whatever section you want, and a system for whatever section you want if you can pay for it. But are they going to be the cards that you want? Hard to say. So there is still that level of randomness because you don't know what order they're going to be coming out of the decks. But you do always have some options available. Something that, when I'm playing Star Wars, the deck building game, I love the Star Wars deck building game that came out for Fantasy Flight a while back. I've already pre-ordered the Clone Wars version of it. But that game sometimes gets frustrating because you might wind up in a situation where the entire row, I think it's called the Galaxy row, has cards either you don't want or that your faction can't even do anything with, except maybe take them out rather than actually purchasing something. This game gets away from that, where it still has randomness of which cards are coming up, but you always have access to all three sections for both decks. That makes for some great decision space where you never really feel like you're just buying something because you have credits to spend. And remember, the credits persist from turn to turn. I would also note here, while we're talking about building your decks, that in this game your decks don't get terribly huge. So typically you're cycling through them a bit faster than in some other games, though remember you're cycling 2 different ones and you're drawing 3 per turn rather than say 5 or 6 total. But it does still feel like you can have some pretty tactical small decks, but that also makes abilities that let you trash cards all the more valuable, because getting those starting cards out of there is actually more beneficial than in some other games because your decks are smaller. They're going to come up more often unless you get them out for more powerful cards. So let me just take you through some quick sample turns here from a player perspective, and then we'll look at how the solo bot works briefly. So I've got my setup here. I've started at 5. I'm the first player. I am at 20 hull integrity. I have 1 power per section to start with. I have my starting cards as the only cards here in my deck. I get to draw them 1 at a time to get to 3 to start with. So I have Cadet Core, who is engineering. Sweet, I've got the nuclear reactor that's also engineering. So now I think I'm just going to go for another system, maybe? Well, no, actually I'm going to go for another crew because I'll need energy to play systems anyway, and I've only got 1 in each. So now that I've drawn my cards, you would normally do that at the end of a turn, but at the start of the game, of course, you're drawing your starting hand. Now I'm going to play all possible cards. So I could get rid of any of these just by discarding to get 2 credits each, but I'm feeling okay with 5 credits, and I really want to get some stuff out here onto the board. So I'm going to put out the nuclear reactor, power cost of 0. Gain 3 energy to any system. I want to be dealing some damage, so I'll take that in tactical, going from 1 to 4. That bottom ability does not trigger yet. Again, that is a crew bonus that comes in the 3rd phase. Cadet Core, again, crew have no costs typically. I'm going to place into engineering, so I get that bonus here. Gain 2 energy to this system, or gain 1, that is a repair icon. Let's gain 1 health. I haven't been damaged yet, so 2 energy it is. Now I'm at 3 for engineering. Cadet Frizz, he is a comms expert. I'm going to assume that I'm going to want that over here because typically your crew bonuses are going to match that section, but not always, as we saw earlier. So Cadet Frizz is going here into comms. Again, I apologize for the glare. I can gain 2 to that system or gain 3 cash. Looking at the cards on offer, I actually think I'm going to go ahead and take the 3 credits, going from 5 to 8. Okay, so I've played all possible cards. Next, I'm going to make any market purchases. Now, I've got these pretty close here just to be able to show you, so I'm going to put the discards just down here kind of off to the side, but you'll know what it is based on the type of card that we're seeing. I do want to show the market over here. So if I was playing like a regular game, Lieutenant Commander Turulk here is too good to pass up with the ability to heal you, basically repair hull integrity every time that it's played and gain a massive amount of power. Hell to the yeah. So this one's going into my crew discard, which would typically be like right there. So that's 4 I've spent. I'm down to 4. Do I want to spend any more? Yes, probably. I'm actually going to spend 3, and I'm going to pick up the Scrizian Claw, which is going to deal some damage, but it's doing so from comms, which is pretty cool. And that does mean I immediately need to replace. Notice that when I took my engineer out, obviously it was immediately replaced because it is a face-up stack. So this is going to go into my system discard. I'll just kind of put it right there, kind of out of the way again. At that point, I can't spend any more unless I want to spend that 1 to get something. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and do that because I do like Boarding Party for the ability to deal damage. Boarding Party is a system, even though it's characters technically. So that's going to go into my system discard. Out comes another card. Now, I have nothing else that I can play. It's time to go to phase 3, collect the crew bonuses. So here we've got the engineering symbol, gain 2 to this system. Nothing actually on the card itself. It's just looking for that matching green symbol here. So I gain 2 more to engineering, taking it to 5. Now I'm going to draw 3 cards. I don't really have much at this point, but I'd love to get Commander Turulk out there soon. Not that it's going to matter because I only had 6 cards to begin with. So regardless, I'm going to draw Cadet Cato, Trade Rocket, and Basic Laser as my new hand here. And so begins the first turn for the other player. We do have some repair abilities coming up, so let's assume that the other player did manage to knock me down by 1. Maybe they played their version of Basic Laser, perhaps. So now I'm at 19, and so begins my next turn. Notice here, I didn't shuffle or anything yet, because even though these are empty, I didn't have to draw a card from them. That's pretty standard logic for a deck building game. You don't actually shuffle the discard to create the new deck, in this case, the discard and everything that's out there for that type into a new deck until you actually have to draw something from the empty space. All right, so I've got my cards here. Well, I definitely want to deal some damage, so let's break out the Basic Laser for 2. I would, boom, move the Hull Integrity down by 1 for the enemy, just like I did here, assuming that it had played it. Again, that doesn't play yet. But notice here, I'm not getting that gain 3 to any system from the nuclear reactor this turn because it only happens the turn that I play it. The only things that persist are the crew bonuses. All right, so now I'm gonna put out Trade Rocket and spend 1, so I'm down to 0 in comms, but Trade Rocket's gonna get me 4 trade, or 4 credits. And then Cadet Cato costs nothing to play. I'm going to put him where he's most advantageous here to trigger that crew bonus in a second, gain 2 to that system, or deal 1 malfunction. I'm going to deal a malfunction. So I had removed the malfunctions from the table. I'll go ahead and put them back here, but let's go ahead and just assume that I'm pulling this. So I can put this into either discard pile for my opponent. And it might be advantageous to put it in the one that's about to shuffle, or I might want to sort of set a time bomb for much later and put it in the one where maybe they haven't used as many cards. So at the beginning of the game, it won't really matter. So malfunction goes out to the other player, and now I have nothing else that I can play. So it's time to do my market purchases. I have 4 credits to spend. I am going to, well, let's make a point here. I'm just not going to spend anything just to prove the point again that it persists from round to round. Why not? Then I go to my crew bonuses. The crew bonus again trigger every turn. So again, I get 2 to this system. I'm now at 7. Over here, there is that connection. I get to draw an extra card at the end of my turn, so I'll have 4 instead of 3. And then over here, that symbol there matches the tactical. That means I deal a malfunction, so I get to give another malfunction to either discard of my opponent. Now I would normally draw 3 cards, instead I get to draw 4, but oh, my decks are empty. So I have to decide what I'm going to draw. I'm going to assume that I want to cycle through some systems because I have some nice damage dealing systems here. So I'm going to say, oh, I'm going to draw my first card from the system deck. That means my 2 purchase systems and all the systems in play get shuffled up, yada yada, and now they're a system deck. Now I draw my card and it is Boarding Party. I don't really have any power in comms, so that's not going to help me too much. So unless I bet on drawing something that's going to give me maybe some power from engineering to spread around, I probably want to get a crew member like this one here, except this crew member is not actually available to me yet. So I'm going to say I'm going to draw a crew card. Okay, so now it's going to become available essentially because it gets shuffled in. And I really want that specific crew member, let's say. So my next card draw is, oh, it is that one. Now, had it not been, then perhaps what I would do is just keep drawing from here. But now that I know I've got the one that I want, I think I'm actually going to go for another system here. And I've got the basic laser. And I get to draw again because of that ability. Let's just make it even. Nope. Well, I could use that here, but it really wouldn't matter either way. But there we go. I've got Cadet Frizz. So now it jumps to the other player. They play. Maybe I get hit for one again, whatever. And then it's eventually back to me again. So here's my hand. Let's see what I've got. Now, the interesting thing here is this is going to let us do something kind of neat. Notice that I have plenty of engineering power. I've got 7. Comms is at 0. Tactical's at 2. So I can play the basic laser for 2 power, taking it down to 0, dealing 1 damage, setting myself up for maybe later because I don't have any tacticians in my hand right now. Okay, I want to play Boarding Party. So now I've got a bit of a choice, right? I can either play this one to comms, even though the green isn't typically going to trigger something in comms, but it could, and gain 4 plus the repair, or I could play Frizz, perhaps to comms, get 2 power for the section. But notice on my Boarding Party, it just so happens that the one, I'm trying to focus without losing focus here, notice that my one comms system that happens to be in my hand, it actually is going to trigger on any symbol, not just a specific one. So, heck, I might as well. I will play the Lieutenant here to gain 4 energy to the system and repair 2. But now notice, looking at Boarding Party, it's going to deal a damage for every crew member in that system. So I'm actually going to put Cadet Frizz in here too to gain 2 more to the system. And then I'm going to play Boarding Party for 2. You play them in any order. And now I deal 1 damage for each crew member of the system. It's 2. I deal 2 damage to them. And then I go to my market phase. I have 4 still to spend. I don't know, maybe I'm going to spend it on Lieutenant Commander Faith, the Chiss-looking character there. Chiss being from Star Wars, Thrawn, and all that. So I'm down to 0. My market phase is done. Now I get to collect my crew bonuses. I do not get this bonus because I do not have a matching crew member here. I do get this one. Now, unfortunately, this is one that's sort of a consequence of this. Not all the crew abilities may necessarily be good. So here, I have to discard any crew in this system, and it triggers off of either the blue or off of the green, either way. So I put them there because it made the ability stronger, but now the crew bonus means they're all gone. And it could have triggered from the green or the blue. Typically, these only trigger 1 time. That's listed on there. If there was going to be multiple triggers, it'd have to be multiple symbols, typically. So these are in my discard here, along with Faith. I'm going to draw 3 cards and keep going, and so on. So you get the gist of how this is going to work. Now let's take a look at how a solo AI turn would work for a couple of turns. So just for poops and laughs, to make it somewhat clean here, you know what I mean, I went ahead and switched out our mat. So for solo, the solo bot is going to start at 6 credits, 20 hull integrity, as you do as well. And then instead of 1 power per system, it starts at 3. It does still have the same either synchronous or asynchronous up to you starting decks, except you're going to shuffle them all together into a single deck. And the idea is that you're going to keep them essentially right there, sort of between the 2 on the mat, and there'll be a discard right next to it here. What I'm going to do instead, actually, is I'm just going to put the deck up there, and I'm going to have the discard be underneath, just to make it easier to see on camera. And then the interesting thing is, instead of having to make a bunch of decisions for the AI as to what they're going to purchase, instead, the AI is going to have its own essentially unique market deck that it gains cards from. And the way that you're going to do that is you're going to randomly, and we'll assume that I didn't have these out already, I'm not going to pick them up or anything, take 5 cards from Tactical, 4 cards from Comms, 3 cards from Engineering, So essentially decreasing as you go this way, 5, 4, 3, and then 2, I'll just grab them from the bottom without seeing them, 2 from each of the crew decks. Okay. And then this gets all shuffled up, and this is the unique market deck just for the bot. Put it wherever. I tend to put it up there next to the malfunction cards just because it's a nice convenient place to put it. They also get to take the top card of this market deck and immediately place it into their discard. So they're going to have that the first time they cycle through. You're going to draw 4 cards as the norm for the bot, but you're going to keep them secret. And you can splay them if you want to see how many there are if you don't know, but keep them separate kind of off to the side so that you know how many they have but not which they have. So they're still going to play all possible cards. So on their turn, they're going to flip over all their cards. So they've got Quick Ship, which in this case is that basic version of it here, Cadet Malkesh, Siege Cannon, and Cadet Vector. So you're going to play as many as can be played. How do you do that? Well, let's check our systems here. Probably the easiest thing to check first, right? So we've got Quick Ship. Can it be played? Yes, it can. It goes here. It costs 1 power for comms. All right, great. Siege Cannon. Can it be played? Yes. Tactical would go down by 2. Siege Cannon. So they've gained 4 more credits, taking them up to the maximum of 10. They've dealt me 1 damage. Okay. Now I got my crew. Remember, crew are not limited to which section they can go in, so there's a quick decision-making process. You're going to put it first to a system with no power. There aren't any of those. Then to a system containing a system card that has an unpaired system bonus. So, okay. So I got these guys. Oh, all right, there's an unpaired blue, so he'll go out here. Unpaired, but it won't match the Siege Cannon. Now, this doesn't have a card that could be unmatched, so I don't consider that the place to put it, I believe. So instead, I'm going to put it in the system with the lowest power, which in this case is actually Tactical. So Tactical gets the 2. Now, the starting cards always have an or ability, gain 2 energy or 2 power to that system or whatever. In the case of this version of the rules from August 2024, they only take the power. I think there was an earlier gameplay video that the creator did using Tabletop Simulator or something as a way of showing the game, and at that time in the solo rules, they gained both. But no, in the current version of the rules, they just get the power. Now, let's say I had not been able to pay for one of these, but by putting them out first, one of them, I would have had enough power to do it. You can do that. So you're trying to play these system cards, and if there's a system card you can't play because you can't afford it, you're going to play out crew in order to get to the power to afford it. And you're going to prioritize ones that match the expertise of that crew bonus on the card. Now, they're never going to play a crew to a system that has full power. So if you can't play a system card for whatever reason, and you can't play a crew card, in either case, you're going to do basically what the player would do, and you're going to just put it in the discard and have them gain 2 credits for each that is discarded that way. Then you go to the market phase. What's going to happen in the market phase? Well, basically, you're going to look at the credit track, and the assumption is that these cards in this deck, despite the fact they have all these different costs, they don't for the AI. But they're kind of pricey because every single card from that deck for the AI costs exactly 3 credits. So they've got 10. They would go all the way down to 1 to get 1, 2, 3 cards added to their discard. That was not a great shuffle, apparently, that I did there. Then they are going to claim any bonus abilities from those crew bonuses. And there are actually clarifications in the rulebook about certain weird items. So they are going to get an extra card. When I draw 4 at the end of the turn for them, they're going to get 5. And you notice here with Vector, he's an engineer. The bonus would only be for a tactician. I don't take a malfunction. For what it's worth, if you do have to take a malfunction that the AI is doing to you, at least in the current rules, you're going to place them into your discard that has the fewest cards in it. So it's sort of a delaying tactic. You might have thought, and as I actually thought before asking for some clarifications, I've been putting it into the discard that has the most cards in it because it's the most likely to shuffle next and have that malfunction come up next. But it's more like setting up a ticking time bomb. You put it in the one with the fewest cards in the discard already. But in any case, I don't get hit by it here. Now, end of their turn, they're going to draw 4 cards plus the 1. Again, from their one deck. Uh-oh, only 2 cards. They still go unseen, right? But they now need 3 more cards. Again, it's all one deck. So everything clears, gets mixed with their discard, blah, 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 becomes their new deck. They get 3 more. Now we're ready for the next turn. So they clear everything because it's all one deck. You can strategically choose which deck you're going to wind up having to clear by doing the reshuffle. And I guess lastly here, when talking about the AI and how it works, there's that question of what about malfunction cards? Because malfunction cards are supposed to trigger when you draw it, except you're drawing the cards for the AI face down. So when do they trigger? Well, when you reveal their hand, that's when they would trigger. And I did get clarification that if something else, some other ability would cause them to reveal, like maybe you've done an ability against them that requires them to discard and you're following the decision tree on how to discard the correct card from their hand, which, by the way, typically they'll just discard the one with the lowest cost, and you get to decide what would be the most beneficial to them to be the one that's being discarded. Or theoretically, you could house rule it and do it randomly if there's other ones with all the same cost. Like in this case, 4 of these are starters that are counted as 0 cost, so technically they have 4 equal options, but you would look and see, okay, based on what he's got out there, which one should be discarded, etc., etc. Again, making the decision that's best for them, worst for you. But say you have to flip it over for something like that. If there's a malfunction in it, you still hold the malfunction and don't actually activate it to the beginning of the solo AI's turn. But you know that it's coming. So there you go, folks. A look at the last command from Ty McDonald from Sentient Games. Currently, at least as of the time that I'm recording this in mid-August 2024, still in the late pledge phase, which can be done directly through Kickstarter itself. I know I meant to keep this kind of short to explain this game a little bit, but I got caught up in it. I enjoy this game so much. It is definitely very quickly becoming one of my absolute favorite deck building games. So I'm really glad I did that Bounty Hunter pledge, both because it lets me play with it early, which is great because I'm having so much fun with it, but also it gives me an opportunity to share it so that maybe, just this once, I can share information about a game from Kickstarter while there's still a chance to get it. There have been plenty of times we've seen games, including deck building games like Solar Titans, where by the time it was out there and people saw that it was a solid game and it might be something they would enjoy, turns out you couldn't get it. You'd have to wait for another Kickstarter later. I also hope that maybe this will drive some folks over to pick up the game, and if that becomes successful enough, maybe he'll do some expansions. Suffice to say, if you're into deck building games, whether you want to play 2-player or solo, you like the idea of 2 capital ships going at it and having some really good decision space with 2 different decks you're building and a lot of options when building your market, plus some engine building along the way, you're going to dig The Last Command. You can check it out again over at Kickstarter. Again, I am not affiliated, just a big fan of this sucker. I expect you might become one too. Thanks for watching.